Okay, so welcome to session 3, which we're having a same as before. There'll be a Q&A afterwards, so please pop your questions into the Q&A panel and use the chat for discussion. This session, like the previous sessions, is supported by a number of resources. So from our web page, if you go to the 3rd session and look at the session resources there, and that's just shown me, by the way, that Ollie, you're on first, aren't you? Then followed by Chris from Avesco. So on renewable energy, the resources that we have got for you include 3 case studies with videos and information on screen. There is from Seaford, Becky and Roy, who are on the panel to answer your questions about their experiences, but we've got some information there about their experience with an air source heat pump and a solar panel. We have a second case study from Newhaven, and that is from Rachel and Adam. They have an air source heat pump solar panel, but they've also virtually rebuilt their house with very high insulation standards and almost airtight, so airtightness measures, and a mechanical ventilating and heat recovery system. All of that put together with their renewable energy and with their insulation has reduced their net expenditure on energy to £85 a year, something most of us can only dream about. So do have a look at how they did that, because they put loads of useful information about their experiences and lesson learned. So that's information is here. And the 3rd case study is from Pevensey, from Andrew Durling, who's here also on the panel. And Andrew has solar PV panels and solar thermal and a very well insulated house with lots of nice thick curtains over doorways. For those of us that are not in a position to use renewable energy, and there's all sorts of reasons why we might not, funding being one of them, then there's information on switching energy suppliers, because that's a useful thing you can do to switch to a renewable energy supplier. And I think looking at their green credentials, we identified 2 that were looking pretty good for that, with 100% renewable energy to the grid, and that was Ecotricity and Good Energy. So there's some information there on that. A little bit of information on grants and funding. It's a bit scarce at the moment. It's as with the insulation and retrofitting, it's now you see it, now you don't. So that's partly what this information is trying to do today, to say, do your research now, find out what would suit your home. And Ollie will be talking about this shortly. If you work out what you think you're going to want to do, then you will be ready in the position when the grants come in. So the one bit of funding that is still prevalent until March next year is Renewable Heat Initiative. What that means is that you pay up front for your renewable energy, but you will get payments back over 7 years, not the full repayment, but a substantial amount that will offset what you've laid out. And there's some information on that on our web pages. And there are other things, like if you produce energy, then you can sell some of that back to the grid. So on the panel today, we have Chris Roland. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us. He's from Avesco, and he has lots of experience behind in setting up community energy schemes, so we'll hear from that. Jason has been substituted. Ollie, who I can't see on the...
Terry.
So we have Terry and Ollie from Ohm Energy. And we have Rachel, unfortunately, hasn't been able to join us, but do look at the videos. But we have lovely to see Becky and Roy, who are on our panel to talk about their experiences. So that's the resources. I shall now stop sharing and hand over to our double act for today, which is now Ollie and Terry. That really does sound like a good name for a double act, doesn't it?
Thank you, Jill, and thanks for inviting us as well. It's a privilege to be able to talk a little bit about some of what we do. We're from Ohm Energy. We're based in Eastbourne, and we do renewable technologies, mostly air source heat pumps and solar. And Terry and myself are going to talk a little bit about the air source heat pump from a practical point of view today. So I'll start the ball rolling on the new boys, so bear with me a little bit, and then any sort of sort of technicalities. Terry can fill in the gaps as such. So an air source heat pump is a unit that sits outside the property. There's two different types of heat pumps. There's ground source heat pump, which takes power from the ground, the heat from the ground, and the air source heat pump, which takes the air from outside, converts it into heating. It's a very efficient system, and it converts the heat from the air into hot water. So typically you'd have a new cylinder, would replace your current cylinder, and it would replace your existing heating system, or it works alongside as a hybrid system, your current heating. It's reliable and it's sustainable heating, and it generates hot water, and the hot water goes into that cylinder, and then that feeds your hot water as you currently have within your property. It's really efficient for your radiators, which may need changing because of age or because of sizing. And one of the things we do is what's called a heat loss survey. That's just to make sure that the property is suitable for a heat pump, and every property is different. So what we do is make sure that the size of the heat pump we would suggest is sized correctly for your property, and that's often to do with the amount of space that's required to heat and the amount of heat loss that's from the property. So older properties tend to not have as much insulation, for example, and probably need to have a larger heat pump. But like I say, they're extremely reliable, and they work all year round by providing you hot water, and they're efficient as well. Typically for an air source heat pump, you're going to get 3 times the amount of energy that you put into it, and it's powered by electricity. So if you're currently on gas, you wouldn't be using gas anymore, oil, so on and so forth. It's extremely efficient as well for underfloor heating. So if you've currently got that, or you intended to have that, it works very well. And it's also typically going to last you 15 to 20 years typically. We use the Mitsubishi EcoDan, which is a product that we've been installing now for 12 years. And, you know, from what the guys tell me, it's, you know, one of the most reliable pieces of kit out there, and the company are extremely good at, you know, working through any problems that we come up against, and, you know, warranty issues, things like that. So, yeah, it's a good piece of kit. The kind of key thing really is just to make sure that there's somewhere for it to go. So, you know, it's got to be outside. It's got to be somewhere that allows airflow around the unit itself. And one of the things we do is look at making sure that, you know, it's practical and, you know, works for you and isn't going to be disruptive to neighbours, for example. It has to be a metre away from boundaries. But there's usually solutions for most situations. Flats are probably the only area that we would probably tend to not get so excited about, because for obvious reasons there's less space to be able to find an area for it to go in. It works using electricity, that's all. So, you know, be wired into your current mains. It's not plumbed in, so there wouldn't be requirement to do that. And yeah, I think that's probably the kind of basic summary of it. One of the other things just to mention is the renewable home incentive as well. So most properties and clients are eligible for the renewable home incentive, which means that you get up to £9,000 back over a period of 7 years. There's some changes coming to that next year, so, you know, it might be coming to an end. We're still waiting for complete clarification on what's happening. If it does come to an end, it looks like there's going to be another scheme coming through, which might mean more of an upfront payment rather than being paid over 7 years. So, you know, I don't think it's going to be the end of the road for grants, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on if it's not something you're considering on doing in the next 3 months. And the other thing just to mention as well is how we do our pre-screening. So if it's something that you'd like to consider with our involvement, we would happily do a kind of pre-assessment of your property, and we tend to do that before even coming out to you, and it's just an opportunity to sort of see what size unit we think you would need after answering a couple of questions based on your heat loss. So it's just a good way for us to give you some basic information on the sizing and the cost of the unit, which tends to be between, well, from about 10, 11,000 pounds, and depending on the size of the unit, up to about 15,000 for the air source heat pump. Ground source is a slightly different kettle of fish, and you need a lot of land for a start. So 600 square meters type size. So it's more of a kind of farm solution, or someone with a lot of land. And the RHI is still eligible for that, but it's you know, it's in the region of 20,000 for an install cost of about 30,000. So yeah, if it's something that we can help with, we'd love to, you know, have a chat and you know, help you through the journey of installing a heat pump. And just one more final point is the solar works really well with it as well. So I know we've got people here that have got solar in the heat pumps. You know, it all works together really nicely, and you know, you do generate, or you do need electricity to power it. So just because you're not paying for your gas or your oil, you'll be paying for electricity. So if you're generating that yourself, then you know that's a win-win situation. Okay.
I was muted. I've noticed some questions in the chat. If you can pop those into the Q&A tool instead of the chat, but we'll try and look back. But we're going to save all the questions till the Q&A. So if it'd be great now to hear from Chris from Avesco.
Okay, I'm going to share screen. I'm going to have to go quickly because I've got quite a lot of slides. Trying to share. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, I'm Chris Roland. I'm the CEO of Avesco. Avesco was set up by Transition Town Lewes in 2007. And we ran a very successful microgeneration grant scheme for 3 years with Lewes District Council, working with local installers. And our vision is to generate 100% of our energy needs locally from renewable energy. This is the first project that Avesco did, in 2011. We installed 98 kilowatts of solar PV on the roof of Harvey's depot in Lewes. And we used the feed-in tariff to pay local shareholders, of which there were over a couple of hundred who invested in this project, to pay them back over a number of years. And at that time, because we had the feed-in tariff, we could give Harvey's Brewery free electricity from this solar PV system, which saves them over £6,000 a year in their electricity bills, and works very well for them because they've got a large chiller inside the building. So on a hot sunny day, solar PV is making nearly all, if not all, of their electricity. The project was very successful, and because of that, we raised more money through community share offers, and we put solar PV on 7 sites initially across the Lewes district, and then a further 8 sites, including the Cavendish School in Lewes, which now all have varying sizes of solar PV systems from around about 10 kilowatts up to about 50 kilowatts at each one of those sites. And that's saving all of those schools money on their electricity bills. We now use what's called a power purchase agreement instead of using the feed-in tariff, because the feed-in tariff doesn't exist anymore, where we sell low-cost electricity to those schools, which right now is a good thing because the price we charge for electricity is pretty low compared with what electricity is selling for at the moment. We went on to do a solar farm, and this is an example of how we scaled up. This is Meadow Blue Community Energy, where there's 5 megawatts of solar PV on a solar farm south of Chichester, and we raised £1.2 million on an ethical platform called FX. The project's now paying back the investors, but as well as that, we've got a community benefit fund. We refinanced the project recently with Triodos Bank, and the community benefit fund is paying money now for the next 3 years to help contribute to Help Our Kelp. And we gave money to laptops for schools during the COVID lockdown, and we give some money each year to the local parish council. So that's working very nicely now, that project. And in fact, we have been selling the electricity from this solar farm at around about 5.5 pence a kilowatt hour to the grid. But we've just signed a power purchase agreement for over 8 pence a kilowatt hour now, which means that next year this should do very well, this project. And that's all due to the energy crisis that we have at the moment. Sadly, that's beneficial for us, but not good for your electricity bills. We also do a lot of community benefit work, and this is Nick Rouse, who's been pretty much with Avesco from the start. He goes into schools, he gives us advice, he's our technical director, and we go into schools, teach them about energy, attend a lot of STEM events, and we're doing some work with a big energy saving network to help people switch energy suppliers to reduce their annual bill cost, because it's important to look at all the who's supplying your electricity and what price they're charging you every year to make sure you're getting a fair deal. And because Avesco got a lot of interest in the project Harvey's Brewery, we set up Community Energy South, and Community Energy South has helped around about 100 new groups across the Southeast set up, including groups in Essex, Hampshire, across the South Downs National Park, and we also work with Community Energy England. What Avesco is working on now, we're working on the Ouse Valley Cares Climate Action funded project, which is some lottery funding, and we're going to be working with the Havens, which is Newhaven, Pevensey and Seaford, and the Polo villages in the Lewis district. We're also using the Rural Community Energy Fund to help us build a 16 megawatt solar farm just north of Ringmer, and we'll have some open days in early November about that solar farm project, both in Ringmer and on a day in Lewis. And we're supporting Get Bikery, which is to encourage the take-up of electric e-cargo bikes in Lewis. And we're working on a project called Community Heat, which I'll tell you about in a second. Okay, Community Heat is a project to electrify the heating of the parish of Barkham. Most of the people in Barkham are using oil for their heating, and we're working with UK Power Networks and Brewer Happold on this project. And this is a sort of diagram of how the electricity supply used to work. It came from a large generator, which could be nuclear, coal, gas, or hydroelectric, all the way down through national grid, through the local grid, which is run by UK Power Networks, down to us as homeowners and to our workplace. It's a very simple model. Electricity flows in one direction. And now we've created a decentralized energy supply. And we've got all sorts of people feeding electricity back into this network. We've got solar panels on people's houses. We've got things like Harvey's Brewery. We've got solar farms. We've got electric cars. We've got battery storage. We've got wind energy. There's 3 wind turbines at the back of Eastbourne. And there's also the Rampion wind farm. And they're all feeding into this network, which is making things more complicated for the district network operator, UK Power Networks. These are a couple of the projects that Avesco already has up and running in Barkham as part of our Community Heat project, and they were funded by Community Investment. And the challenge for us is that we have the Green Growth Strategy, which is committing us to phase out fossil fuel heating in new and existing homes in the next 10 years. So we're going to be moving away from oil and gas, or natural gas. And how does Barkham do this in an affordable way when we've got a very constrained grid? And how does Barkham move to electric cars when we know that the take-up for electric vehicles is around about 45% growth by 2025? Interestingly, I got into a Co-Wheels car in Lewis the other day, which was a petrol car, and there was a big note on the Co-Wheels car that said, "Very sorry, couldn't buy any petrol, you might have 50 miles left." And it was the first time when I thought to myself, I prefer to be in an electric vehicle. Okay, Barkham, here's some facts about Barkham. Avesco has been working with Barkham for about 10 years. In 2012, 77% of the village was using oil for heating. The village has 175% above national average for energy use, and the homeowners have high energy bills and high carbon emissions. Therefore, rural communities on oil, as opposed to on the gas network, are very carbon intensive, and it costs them a lot of money to provide their heating. This is typical of most off-gas rural communities, and there's about 4 million homes off gas in the UK. That's why UK Power Networks are particularly interested at this moment in time in these communities. We think that local ownership is really important, and we're working on a planned approach as opposed to an unplanned approach with UK Power Networks. So that by working with them and Brewer Happold, we can find out what's the most effective way for the village to electrify its heat. And that means both in terms of comfort, affordability, and cost for UK Power Networks when it comes to upgrading their substations. So this is how Community Heat's doing this. Avesco's surveying homes. We've already surveyed almost 200 homes. We've had almost 50 homes with non-invasive energy monitors in them. and we have given Lewis pounds to those homeowners who took part in the surveying. And Brewer Happel will use the anonymised data that Avesco collects to simulate different scenarios in the village. And they'll have various archetypes, typical archetypes of homes, which they will then build up information about those archetypes from the surveying that we've done. And UK Power Networks will come up with the optimum approach for the village, and Community Heat will provide the village with next steps, a master plan to transition to net zero, and will provide each homeowner with a home pack so that they're ready to make the move to switch from oil heating to electrifying their heat. This is a screenshot of the digital twin which Brewer Happel are building at the moment with UK Power Networks. It's got a dashboard, and the dashboard shows how the homeowners, the savings of the homeowners would make by putting in more insulation, switching to heat pumps, and the carbon reduction that each one of those homes would make. So it's quite interesting for homeowners as individuals, and builds up a lot of data and information for Brewer Happel and UK Power Networks to use. And this is our roadmap to set up Barkham Energy. We've already had 2 steering groups meetings to get this started, and we've got a community benefit society started for the Barkham parish so that they can own their own local energy supply. And we're not only looking at homes which are making this transition, but at small projects around the village where there might be 200 kilowatts in a field that's feeding into the local network. And we have a project called the Electric Church, where we're trying to electrify the heating for the church and some of the homeowners in the Barkham area. We're working with trusted network of local installers, and we've already had meetings with some of those installers, and one of those is Allotment Energy, who are based in Eastbourne, who are here just now speaking. And we're working on where we identify loans and grants for homeowners so that we can signpost them to the most affordable way to make this transition. And we are working on how there could be a local tariff. That's not an easy thing to achieve, but we constantly look at whether we can, how we can supply local people directly with energy. And there are various ways in which you might be able to do that. One of them is called sleeving. And we want to support vulnerable people to make this energy transition affordable as well. So we're trying to identify grant schemes and the best way for them to make this change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. That was a whistle-stop tour of all the very, very many schemes that you're doing. I know there have been some questions. I don't know whether there are any in the Q&A panel, but Gemma, there are some in the chat. Can you see them there?
Yeah, there was one in the chat. Let me find it. So the first one was to Ollie. Do you think the way forward is for air source heat pump and ground source heat pump? Or instead thinking, will we wait for it to go to green hydrogen?
I can probably answer that one, if that's right, Ollie. I think with hydrogen, it's not quite ready as yet, although we are, well, actively, there's a lot of companies out there fitting hydrogen-ready boilers, Worcester Bosch being one of them. I think it will come. It depends how they're going to distribute it. And there is talk of obviously using the existing gas grid, etc. Off-grid people with oil currently, we don't quite know how on earth they're going to do that, whether it's going to be bulk tanks or whether they're going to do it at all. So in that scenario, I would still see heat pumps as being the forerunner for people that are off-grid.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions that have been answered, but I'll read them out. And then perhaps if you want to answer them again for everybody. So example, a house is already fully insulated, loft cavities, double glazed and sealed windows and doors, replumbed and efficient radiators installed, 3 years new, underfloor heating and heated with a highly efficient gas boiler. Question 1, if so, does a heat pump installation require the plumbing, radiators and boiler to be ripped out and replaced with new? I think Jason replied to that one. Do you want to reply again?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think basically that's a good question. You at the moment, natural gas is very similar to the running cost of a heat pump, an air source heat pump anyway. So it's more a case of an environmental thing if you're going to change from a gas boiler to a heat pump. There are still money. There's still money to be saved there, but it's a very similar running cost. The answer to does the plumbing system have to be ripped out? That's very sort of situation based. Every job needs to be bespoke designed. Every house is different, and I think in the question it was something like this. It's sort of thinking outside the box. One solution doesn't fit all, and that's absolutely right. We have different size heat pumps, different size hot water cylinders, and different size systems. The plumbing system generally doesn't need to be ripped out, i.e. the pipes going to the radiators or the underfloor heating. It would need to be tested, obviously, as if you were getting a new boiler or something like that. Sometimes the radiators are actually big enough. A lot of older houses, us heating engineers back in the day, what size radiators are on even in my living room? We used to go, well, what size is that window? And just stick one in. We don't do that anymore. It's a room by room heat loss study. We'll design the radiator or the heat emitter to that lower temperature of the heat pump. It's also a bit of a myth with heat pumps that you can't get the heat out of them. We can run them at 60 degrees if we want to. A boiler's normally 70, 75 degrees, so it's not that much different. The point being, it's not efficient to do that. So we want to be running it as low as possible. Some underfloor heating systems are being designed at 35 degrees now. Radiators, typically, you're going to be up at about 45 degrees. So the answer is hopefully no, but it's very situational and depends on the job.
Okay, thank you. So is it more efficient to run at a constant temperature for the whole day, or so with a conventional heating, you would put your heating on and warm up for a couple of hours at a high temperature, or is it better to have the air source heat pump and have a constant lower heat throughout the day?
Yeah, good question. I think the way the heating industry has gone, whether it's gas, oil, heat pump, whatever, is we don't necessarily have timed on-off periods anymore. We have periods where you might get up in the morning, it might be 20 degrees from 6 to 8, and then everybody goes to work, and it might just set back to 18, 17, 16 degrees throughout the day. Doesn't mean the heating system is running all day, but if it drops below that, it just gently heats it back up. And then it might boost again when everyone's coming home from work. At 4 or 5 o'clock, might go up to 20, 21, 22, whatever that comfort level is. The key with a heat pump is any decent heat pump will run on what's known as a weather compensator. So when it's mild outside, it will be giving you very little heat through the radiators, but the point being your house isn't losing heat when it's mild outside, i.e. let's say 15 degrees. You might still want the heating on in the evening, it might be chilly. If that dropped to say 0 degrees outside, the heat pump will be working a lot harder, putting more and more heat through your radiators and underfloor heating. And the reason that is because the fabric of your house or the building is losing more heat. Obviously, there's arguments to older properties that aren't insulated very well and properties that are insulating extremely well. And that's where we set those heat pumps up to take that into account for what the property type.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just checking the second part of that question. Did we answer that one? I think it's about ripping out, really. Is it better to reuse what you have or rip out and start again, as we were talking about in an earlier session?
Deborah, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A there too for Avesco.
Okay, I think there's one more about planning permission. Does an air source unit require planning permission, or is it just the 1 metre rule? And what about noise level of the unit?
Yeah, good question again. Generally, we need to install them 1 metre from the property's boundary for permitted development. We do a calculation to the neighbour's nearest opening, so door or window, and that's how we work out the noise levels. And that's again for permitted development planning. Most of the time, you can get it under permitted development. There are situations where full planning permission would be required. If you have more than one heat pump, and it's all based on the square meterage or the footprint of the heat pump, that would require generally planning. If it's ground source, it's a lot easier because the unit's inside, so we don't normally have to worry so much with regards to that. There was just a quick question on there about, does water run through underfloor heating? Does it leak? No, it hopefully doesn't leak, but it is water that runs through it, yes. But we test it to very high pressures to ensure that it doesn't leak when we put it in, and there's no joins in the pipework.
Okay, thank you.
Gemma, I'm just wondering if Becky and Roy want to comment on the living with their air source heat pump and the noise, because there were questions about the noise.
Yeah, the noise is quite minimal actually. We hardly notice it at all, do we?
No, I think
it's running.
And I think the thing is to think about where you're going to site it as well. We said, oh, we'll have it on the patio, which would probably be fine, because to be quite honest, it doesn't run that much, and it particularly wouldn't be running that much in the summer. But it's actually out the front, so it's up where we would park the car. So there's nobody goes there anyway. But we've had lots of people round who are interested, and we have to make it run so they can hear it, and they go, "Oh, is that it?" You know, it sort of purrs. So yes, it's certainly not intrusive in any way. No, it's fine. But you know, you would get advice from your installer about the best place to put it, and obviously avoid putting it, you know, as you say, right near somebody else's window or whatever.
And I think that the question earlier about taking everything out, we didn't have to take.
We haven't had to do that, no. And I wouldn't say our heating system was anything special, so that was a big relief for us, and obviously kept the cost down. But the disruption as well, I was kind of slightly dreading having to have all that, and the waste of ripping stuff out would have been heartbreaking, really. So yeah, so it's a big relief that we could use our existing radiators.
Yeah.
I think also having a cylinder, so you have to have the space for a cylinder inside the house as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and again, I wasn't sure where they were going to put that, but somehow magically they managed to find the right sort of size and shape of cylinder to put it in our old airing cupboard. So
yeah, that was the only thing, wasn't it? We lost our airing cupboard. That was the only.
Yeah, you don't in effect, you still have some space, but it's not as effective as an airing cupboard as it was, shall we say. There is some heat there, but then, you know.
And the other point about heating up the radiators, we had a test going on overnight to test our existing pipe work, and the radiators got really hot while I was doing the test. So there was no.
No, it can be hot, but yeah, I mean the radiators generally are not you know hot to touch like that. But yeah, we're quite happy with, well, very happy with their level of heat and comfort and responsiveness of the system. You know, my mum lives with us, so she's you know quite mobile, so it's really important that we have good heating, and yeah, we're very happy with this.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Can I ask you also, have you got cavity wall insulation and loft insulation in your house?
We've got loft insulation. I'm in the process of getting cavity wall insulation, but I'm really quite confused at the moment. What is the right installation for us? So I'm doing quite a bit of research on that, but I do intend to get cavity wall insulation very soon.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I was only asking to see how efficient the air source heat pump was, with the amount of insulation in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we seem to be managing okay, but I think we could do better. It's like, you know, Roy's just said to me, oh gosh, you know, check all our light bulbs and things. I think we can always do better. So yeah, we are still on a bit of a journey there, aren't we? But
it certainly does focus the mind as well when you have something like work like this done, and then you start thinking about other things where you can sort of make savings as well, and that is a big one for us at the moment, isn't it, the wall insulation. But I just want to make sure I'm getting the right insulation, because I've read a lot of things about insulation, good and bad, so you know, it's just finding what's right for us.
Yeah. Oh look, somebody's.
Okay, thanks. So there's one here. Does Avesco have any projects in the offing for solar energy generation at scale in Eastbourne? As the sunshine capital of the UK, it'd be good this asset being used to its fullest to reduce our emissions and help us reach our carbon neutral target. So Chris, would you like to, I know you've answered on the chat, but.
Not at the moment in Eastbourne itself. We do have one large project north of Ringmer that we're working on to getting through the planning permission at the moment. We secured the grid offer for that and the land for that. We'd love to do something in Eastbourne, either rooftop solar PV that's community owned or a ground mounted system. We did look at a potential, not as big as the project we're planning at Ringmer, but a smaller scale project quite near where the miniature railway was. And there was some land that was up for sale there. Unfortunately, I think a developer bought the land, and we wanted to try and buy the land and bring it under community ownership, use it to protect the land and have some renewable generation there. But these opportunities come and go, and we'd love to do something in Eastbourne if we could.
Great, thanks. Are we all right for a couple more, Jill? Yeah.
Yes, we are. Can I just present one that came in advance through the website? I don't know whether it's really, it's a question. Somebody has a solar water heating panel installed some time ago by a company called Solar Twin, who ceased trading, and that pump circulated the hot water into the tank, and that failed after 5 years. And do you know anyone willing or able to replace a pump? This is about maintenance.
Yeah, maybe your manager knows, but I could certainly direct them to some local installers. There are some good local installers for solar thermal. I might want to name some. We could probably give about 3 different names. So there's some variety about that. If you could give us the contact details, we'll do that.
I'll do that. Thank you, Chris. Yes, Gemma, we've still got time for more questions if you found them.
Okay, yeah. So from Julie and Steve, we're hoping to build an eco house on Polegate in the next few months. Any suggestions for heating and water systems when we'll be installing solar PV? We're considering radiant heaters.
Okay, yeah, I think the best route for that is to get in contact with someone like ourselves, Home Energy, and we'll come out and have a look and have a discussion about the property. We can do a lot of our work off of plans and suggest different technologies, different scenarios. Yeah, I would definitely get that in at an early stage, because some of this stuff takes a long time to plan and even get hold of at the moment. The world's delivery system is crumbling, as we probably all know. But yeah, definitely get an installer in, MCS accredited installer, and say like ourselves, and we'll come and do an audit for you, no problem.
Great, thanks. I think that's all the questions. Have I missed any? No. There's lots of useful information in the chat though, if I'm sure you go through it. Okay, hand back to you, Jill. You're on mute.
It really for the best if I stay muted, but yes, Home Energy do come highly recommended, and Becky and Roy are 2 satisfied customers. Of course, other companies are available locally, but if you have happy to recommend others, if you've had some good installations, then do share. We do have a bit more time if anybody does have more questions. Just checking. But also I'll open it up to anybody on the panel if there's bound to be things that we've forgotten to bring up. There's so much we want to say, but we don't really want to make you sit and watch us for hours. That's not a lot of fun. But just a reminder that all 3 sessions have been recorded, and we've put a lot more information into the website than we can cover in 3 hours. And lots of Ray and Steph helped to make some videos which are really worth watching. Also thanks to Rosie and Sultan for helping with some others, and there are some I did by myself which are fairly low standard, and I don't want Ray and Steph to take the blame for those. So there are videos which I hope have got lots of useful content, so do have a look at those. Andrew's put a note in the chat to say the Eastbourne Eco Action Network will continue to link with Avesco to keep exploring ways of getting more community solar PV into Eastbourne. Yes, and if you just happen to have a plot of land that you think is surplus to your requirements, that would make a good community lot, but look out for things that are up for sale. We're always looking for things to use, and other projects which we haven't had time to mention that both Eastbourne Eco Action Network and Seaford Environmental Alliance are looking at, and community forests and community allotments. It didn't really come into the home today, but there's lots of information about. I don't know whether Andy, you're still here, Andy, whether you could tell us anything about the community allotments.
Sorry, about what the
the allotment scheme at Churchdale Road, which is, and others like it.
oh right, yeah. Well, there is a community allotment at Churchdale Road allotments. There's a really excellent community allotment there, which is very welcoming. Anybody can drop in and get involved or just chill out. And the community allotment community is extremely strong. It's like an Aladdin's cave there. It's a real paradise. There's so much surplus fruit and vegetable being grown there, and which people can take away. They even do a free lunch on a Friday morning. Free lunch where they cook up their surplus vegetables, and you can join in. It's a real community vibe down at the Churchdale Road allotments. It's run by the Gather Collective, so
it's very definitely worth visiting. I've just spotted one. Becky's got her hand up, and two, there's another question in the chat from Rachel.
Like quickly, I was just going to say we've just had our first export payment from our supplier of £40 for 1 month, but we very stupidly didn't apply for that until August, so we missed out on all the summer months. So top tip, if you're getting solar panels and you're exporting lots of lovely electricity to the grid, make sure you've applied for your export payment. It will take just a week or so to get approved, but sadly we didn't do that. So yeah, that is my top tip. It's nice to see the payment is rolling in there. So
Jill, have you seen the question? It's that churches are challenging. We know this from Community Heat and our electric church project. Oh, perhaps, sorry, that's not the question, is it? I thought I was, sorry.
That's the answer.
Yeah, that is the answer. Sorry, I'll move on. Okay. Have you any experience of enabling buildings such as churches to improve energy efficiency and install renewable energy sources?
Does Chris want to answer that one out loud?
Apologies, you're going to say it again. I was just replying to someone in the chat.
Oh, feel free to answer out loud, because I don't think the chat gets captured in the recording.
Ask me the question, please, again.
Okay. Have you any experience of enabling buildings such as churches to improve energy efficiency and install renewable energy?
That's the one I was trying to answer. Oh God, churches are so tricky. We've got a project in Barkham called the Electric Church. They've got this massive oil-fired boiler with quite high energy bills, but they're almost impossible to insulate. We looked at the possibility of using an air source heat pump. It probably wasn't practical for the church itself, but maybe for the hall that was attached to the church, which is much more modern. We wanted to look at some solar PV to provide them with some reduction in their electricity cost, or a way maybe for providing an income or something like that that might back up some energy efficiency. It really comes down to how much does the church use. If it's like for a few hours on a Sunday, then it's really tricky to make that work. It's site specific, I'd say, and you've got to look at each one individually. There are churches that have got solar PV systems on the roof of them. We've seen a few. Obviously, we might have to check that with the planning. Yeah, I don't know what to say other than they're very difficult churches, but there depends on the site, and there may be a way to make it work. Looking at the site, something work.
Thank you. And Becky says in chat that the Church of England have an eco-church scheme where they're supporting churches become more sustainable. So perhaps have a look there. Okay, we got a couple more questions. Check on there. What are the costs and green benefits of running the heating system at a lower temperature by using air source heat pump? That's all.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. I'll probably jump in there again if that's all right. It's generally heat pumps produce a lower temperature than a boiler normally anyway. So we design everything to a lower temperature. But the cost benefits, even with a normal heating system, gas or oil, anything, if you're oversizing your heat emitters and running everything at a lower temperature, there's always more efficiency. because you're not using as much power, whether that's gas, oil, electricity, to get that higher grade heat out of whatever unit it is. So anything run at a lower temperature, central heating wise, is better, but more efficient.
Thanks. This is a question for Chris. I live in a block of flats for people over the age of 55, owned by a non-profit housing association. The main heating in the communal areas is electric radiators, and the communal washroom, washing, drying machines is electric. Is there anything the housing association can do to reduce the communal energy cost, which obviously affects the service cost for the flat tenants?
It sounds like it's subject to whether there's some room on the roof to put some solar PV. It might be worth looking at that, because the communal areas then could benefit from the electricity, low cost electricity from that during the daytime. Maybe put a battery in if that's affordable and makes sense for them. I keep on saying everything's, that's electricity, but otherwise insulation, wherever you can put that in, better windows, better insulation. That's so important to get down the energy bills in the first place.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this has been answered. As it says, I know that the heat exchanger for an air source heat pump is different and requires an additional cylinder. Why remove the previous cylinder? Keep both.
Generally the heat, because of the lower temperature of a heat pump, you need a bigger heat exchanger inside that hot water cylinder. So a bigger coil, we call it. It's normally about 3 times bigger than a gas boiler one, and that's just to get the heat out, extract the heat out of that heat exchanger, if you like. And it's just because the heat pump isn't as powerful as say a gas boiler or an oil boiler. So it's just like oversizing a radiator to get more heat out of it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, hang on. No, I think have we got them all? So there's been a flurry, so I'm just catching up.
Kerry has asked if it's possible to have a copy of the recordings. We will be putting the recordings up on the website, so we will be sharing those. So yes. And somebody has asked, Hilary has asked, what is the furthest distance the heat pump can be found from the property cylinder location?
Generally, that's going to be, it depends on the heat pump, the size of the heat pump, the size of the pipework, and the size of the pumps. It's very site specific. Generally, you're not going to want it more than about 20 metres away, and even that's pushing it a little bit. With the further it goes away, the larger the pumps you've got to use, the more inefficient the system's going to be, the more electric you've got to use to pump the pumps and the fluid of the water through the heat pump. So ideally, 15 to 20 metres at maximum. We also have to use, if the pipework's on the ground, very expensive pipework that's insulated and waterproof, so that we don't lose any of that heat going from the heat pump back to the property.
I've just spotted another question, which is probably the last one we can take, from Rachel. Who can I ask to help me with getting a big old house go carbon neutral? There's not so much funding for getting that kind of advice at the moment, but Warmer Sussex, I think it's Warmer Sussex still, the names keep changing. Warmer Sussex still do offer a survey service. It's just it's no longer part funded by the government. So if you pay for advice, you're going to get a lot of help. So what they will do is they will come and look at your house, find out how you use it, and they will draw up a whole phase plan in priorities for the steps that you might take to improve it. So if you've got a big house, it would definitely be worth getting some advice like that. Otherwise, you just don't know where to start. And it's really, really vital that you look at the house as a whole with retrofitting. So you've got to consider the ventilation alongside the insulation, particularly with an older house, which needs to continue to live and breathe. So it's definitely worth getting advice, and Warmer Sussex are a very useful source. It's just, sadly, you don't get so much support. I think funding, I think it's probably about £200 for a whole house survey. They offer other services on top of that. So they will also find you contractors, recommended contractors, and offer to project manage. But have a look at their website and talk to them. There's not really any help in that way for small projects. So that's good if you're considering a whole house project. But otherwise, talk to local suppliers about small steps you can take, recommended suppliers. Okay, I do think we have we've reached 2 minutes over, which I do apologise because I don't want to keep the panelists or any of you any longer. It's stopped raining now. So thank you very much to all the panelists today, and of course to Chris, Ollie, and Terry. It's difficult remembering with Jason, to Becky and Roy, to Andrew, to Gemma, to Steph and Ray, and to everyone else that's helped through all the sessions. I found it very interesting. I hope you have, and I'm going to mention it again, but yeah, do have a look at the videos and the website because there's a lot more information there. Thank you.